Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of the COVID-19 Small Business Support Centre. This webinar is brought to you by Enterprise Lab in association with a number of our partners, SoPro, Techie, and NatWest, etc. Now, this particular topic today that we're addressing is around digital strategies, more in sign with things like digital development and also digital communications. I think as we start to come through this period of uncertainty and maybe get businesses back rearing to go, have times changed in the way that we do business? Has times changed in the way that we have to present our businesses? And has times changed for the way we communicate to our customers? The next 45 minutes or so will try to deep dive into that. But before we go into our webinar, I'd like to introduce my panel of experts. Coming over to you, Ryan first. Ryan, how are you?
Very good, thank you, Ketan.
Brilliant. Yeah, very good, thanks. Just for our audiences, could you tell them a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I run a business called SoPro. We are about a 5-year-old UK-based digital marketing agency. We run the direct outreach B2B sales strategies for a few hundred clients now, so globally. It's direct email-based prospecting service. And yeah, that's me.
Brilliant. Welcome to on. I'd also like to introduce a new partner to Enterprise Lab, David. David, how are you doing?
I'm good, and yourself?
Brilliant. Could you share a little bit about yourself as well, please?
Yes, so I run a company called AppZilla, which is an online web and mobile app development company. I myself have been in the IT sphere for the last 30 odd years or so. So this has grown from working on laptops, desktops, all the way to internet now. So IT is definitely my game there.
Wonderful. It's a pleasure to have you on as well. Last but certainly not least, our resident expert, Piers. Piers Mummery, how are you?
I'm very well indeed, thanks, Kat. And yes, great to be here again. So I'm Piers Mummery, and I'm the UK Managing Partner for Techie, which is an on-demand executive service. So I basically specialise in leadership and business advisory work. I sit on a couple of boards. I'm passionate about entrepreneurialism. I've been an entrepreneur for the last 30 years and built companies, sold companies, raised money, lost money, made money, and all the rest of it. So delighted, and I'm really looking forward to this subject today. I think we've got two fantastic experts. So yeah, looking forward to some good discussion.
Absolutely, and I think it's we should just kind of get stuck in, really dive straight deep into it. We've had conversations in the past on past webinars around what the pandemic has done in terms of forcing people to slow down their businesses, in terms of there's been a huge customer loss stuff. And I think, but there's also been a realization that those that perhaps weren't so digital need to become a lot more digital. And, the rise of remote working and the fact that a lot of people have had to be working from home, and the increased use of platforms, even like this, that we're using, has meant, given indications to businesses at this stage that if you're not digitized in one way, shape or form as you move into your future, you do kind of put yourself into that race for obsolescence, if that's such a word. Now, what I want to kind of talk about here a little bit is why it's important first to have a digital presence. Now, we've talked a little bit about this with Saurabh Bhargava on one of our previous webinars. But David, coming from that kind of IT industry, I'm going to come to you first. Why is it important, even more so now, that businesses are looking to have digitized elements to their business?
Well, I think at the moment, as we've seen, people have to work from home. This hasn't been the norm, if you wish, up to now. Right. And in order to work from home, you have to have that digital presence. And people being at home want to be able to shop. They want to be able to look at your website. They want to be able to get the information that you can provide. And the only way to do that is through a digital presence. So if you don't have that, you are really limiting your own business. So having a really good website with all your products online, your services, your white papers, whatever it is that you want to offer to the customer or to other businesses is essential. And nowadays, most people are on mobile. So if you don't have a mobile app as part of it as well, you are cutting your market down by probably 60 to 70%. I think the last Google analytics showed that roughly 63 or 65% of people rather go onto a mobile phone or a tablet as opposed to a computer. So both are now essential. And it's not just having a website that works on a mobile app, it's often having a mobile app that is dedicated to your system as well. And those together will allow customers, like in today's environment, to still be able to access your business. Whereas if you don't have this presence, your doors are shut. How can people get hold of you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there is this whole kind of uptake that, you know, I think if you go back 3-4 years ago, almost even in the UK, nearly 60% of businesses or small businesses didn't even have a website. And there was this big push to get people onto, you know, digital in that way, shape or form. I think there is this whole rigmarole around, you know, okay, once you are digital, you know, you've got to become a digital marketer. And you've got to become a broadcaster and a producer and a presenter and you know, you've got to be able to do social media posts. You've got to be hit fab and stuff like this. Now, Ryan, as there is a relevance, as David says, to the importance of having some element of digitization in your business, where do you find is the block when it comes to communications? Because I mean, obviously, we're just coming through this kind of period of uncertainty, and you were just saying before we kind of started that seems to be a little bit more energy in clients coming back now and wanting to grow their business. What's the most important thing from a communication and prospecting perspective that you think business owners should be looking at when they're using digital tools as well?
Well, yeah, so I think what we've actually seen over the last few months, because you know, we've all been aware that the world at large has been going digital probably since the turn of the century, you know, slowly but surely migrating. And what we've seen, and I think when we look back from kind of decades in the future, we're going to look at 2020 as a point where we've really accelerated. And I think that right now, the world has gone digital first in a way that it's never done before, and that's happening across industries. There are so many examples. You know, my last haircut. Did I go to a barber? No, I didn't. I ordered a pair of clips online, and I downloaded a video to encourage my wife to take some instructions first. And, even the incorporation of digital in something as traditional and physical as that kind of experience, right down to in the business world, obviously things like our awards events, education at large, training. Schools and colleges have transitioned already to remote learning models, and that's the same in kind of commercial training as well. So,
Can I just interrupt? I'm struggling to hear you on your microphone. I don't know if anybody else is.
Yes, I'm also.
Okay, let me see what I can do.
The wonders of modern technology.
Yeah, it's just fading in and out. I mean, I know.
What I'm going to do, I'm just going to get. I'm going to get a headset, and that should solve it.
Yeah. Okay. So while Ryan's actually out there, I think one of the things that he was just saying in terms of digital services, online services are a lot more apparent at this stage. You know, you've got a situation where you can't go down to simply just book in an appointment with your barber and just go in and get your hair cut. So most people are actually compelled to actually purchasing clippers, watching some online tutorials, and I think Ryan, actually, your wife's done a pretty good job. Actually, I mean, you want to see the same money actually at the end of the day, but essentially, I think what we're trying to kind of address here is there is, and we talked about this last time, Ryan, around the sensitivity of what you communicate and how you communicate in this current period. I think we don't really need to I'm a believer that we don't really need to keep talking about the effects of COVID-19 now in our marketing and the way we talk to people, because everyone knows it's there now. You know, it's not really an elephant in the room. I think it's really more about how do we push people now, encourage people to move forward. You know, as you guys over at SoPro, you do a lot of prospecting and stuff like this. You're now going to be turning the wheel, I guess, with your customers as they're coming on and they want to start to prospect more leads and stuff. So what kind of strategies are you guys taking at the moment with your communication? What kind of advice are you giving to your clients on the way they should be moving forward?
Yeah, so there's sort of two sides to that, really. I mean, the first is, you know, the changes that we're making to active prospecting campaigns.
Yeah.
I'll just check that you can hear me okay now. Guys, loud and clear? Perfect. Yeah, so there's two halves. What are we doing with the active campaigns? Well, all of those have had revised targeting. There's, you know, the vast majority of clients that we have target more than one industry, might target lots of different verticals. So they'll be recalibrating where they're focusing their time and attention. That might be geographic, but for the most part, it's done by vertical. Yeah. First, and then some other considerations like smaller companies or larger companies being more appropriate to market to at the moment. And likewise, you know, even certain job titles, there's probably a bit of a shift in the change in profiles that are available to respond to marketing at the moment, with you know, executive teams in smaller businesses right now being tied up with things like arranging financial support packages, as opposed to looking at kind of biz dev roadmaps or other kind of perhaps sort of product development pieces. So yeah, there's a not near total, but there's a significant revision to targeting across the board. Then you've got the proposition itself. So what we found was that there was a sort of secondary uplift when, so targeting readjustments, you know, did that immediately, but then people were realizing that actually the message wasn't quite landing as it was, as it had been prior to COVID. So actually shifting the proposition, you know, what is it the company's offering, not just the language that they're using, but the product or service itself, the way it's packaged, what we're doing, that being adjusted and presented in a way that fits in with a target prospect solution to the current situation, and helping them with, you know, whatever it might be, but how does that thing kind of weave into getting them out of the current predicament and moving forward. And then really the third of the three things that we're doing with all of our clients at the moment is just adjusting the messaging, and then that's going to be the tone of voice. Do we need to reference the pandemic conditions at in the first opening line of the email, that kind of thing. The answer to that has changed. Certainly in the first few weeks, it was appropriate, I think, to make some reference to the chaos. I think at the moment, and our figures are suggesting quite clearly now that you are going to get better response rates if you're not labouring the point on, kind of well-wishing and hope everything's okay under these kind of unprecedented circumstances, and just being a bit more sincere. This is a sales message at the end of the day. I think we're all getting a lot of similar communications coming in that sort of start with fairly insincere kind of COVID statements of a sales pitch tacked onto the end, and that's not really resonating. So it's just a kind of language change that's being done as well. So those three things together are making a huge difference, and results on our side are as they were actually now.
I mean, it's interesting you bring that, and Piers, I'm going to bring you in very, very shortly in a second. Just what a couple of weeks can do in terms of changing the demeanor. I mean, if we go back almost, 6 weeks ago, we're talking really, like you say, Ryan, about the sincerity, the empathy that you have, the unprecedented times. I think that statement is overdone now. We don't want to talk about unprecedented times. This communication now needs to be more of authority, and I don't mean where you're cracking a whip, but it's almost giving that kind of expert authority positioning that this is the time, this is how we do things, this is where you move forward. It's kind of almost as if you're coaching your client into particular things. What's been interesting, David, as well, bringing in is the number of people I've spoken to who have recently, because of being lockdown at home, they've actually started to think about putting things like Shopify or e-commerce onto their platforms, where they can start actually selling some stuff, from a digital base. Thinking about things like ClickFunnels, etc. And I'm going to be coming to you in a little while, basically around your take on things like that, compared to actually having more substantial position built, like things like WordPress. And if you're coding in particular things on WordPress, if WordPress changes its version, it can trip up your whole site for a certain aspect. So I want you to just think a little bit about the effectiveness of other plugins and stuff like that as we move forward. But before we go there, taking in what Ryan has said, Piers, and we've talked about this whole survive, revive, thrive kind of thing. How important is it that business owners today and people that are trying to go out there to procure new clients or recapture their existing clients or restart the business with their customer base, that their language, tonality, and communication is now moving from sincerity and empathy to more authority?
Well, there are two specific angles I want to approach here. Firstly is just to the point you made about being an authority. Let's just take it back a step. We are dealing with a once-in-a-lifetime event that, with the exception of a handful of people around the planet, nobody has ever experienced this before. So therefore, there is by virtue no authority on this, because no one knows what the outcome is going to be and what we're going to be. The Spanish flu pandemic was probably the last one back in 1919. So I think the difficulty with being an authority on this is it's just not possible, because we just don't know what the future is going to hold. So that's one thing I want to say. The second part, sort of follow on that, which is the need to be authentic in everything that we do is paramount, and I'll come on to that in a second. But that's very difficult because we've only been in this for about 2 to 3 months. So how could you possibly be an authority, and how could you possibly be authentic or done anything that's got sustainability or some lasting effect? We just don't know. So my general sense is, in the context of where we are today, treat a lot of this with a light touch. That's the sort of first part of my what I'm hearing. But I think more deeper than that, I also want to talk and this applies to what Ryan was saying in terms of communication, is all engagement, whether it's digital enablement or digital communication or any form of engagement, drives feelings. And if we look at the traditional sense of how you reach feelings, it's either through sort of seeing, hearing, touching, or feeling. Digital principally is around seeing and hearing. You can see something, you can read something, you can hear something, or you can watch something. So it's basically seeing and hearing. What you miss is the physical engagement, i.e. the touch points on that. The sense of feeling that creates is the sort of outcome. And I think anyone who's a digital marketeer, or any marketeer, frankly, has to understand the feelings and actions that become the outcome from what people see and hear. So it leads into the tonality, what you say, how you say it. There's a very interesting business I've done some work with. In fact, I was a non-exec chairman for them, called Pomegranate. And they've launched a very, very intellectual study around what they call emotional ignition, which is the emotions involved in digital buying and digital engagement, because it is a feeling. And throughout all of that, if you think about the key here for me, and I often bang on about this, is it's all about authenticity. So whatever you're saying, you've got to believe it, and you've got to be real about it. Because what I've seen a lot of recently, and literally in the last few weeks, is a huge number of people who've been digitally forced to go and do what they have to do. Okay, but it lacks any sort of it's like the swan paddling underneath like this, because none of it's real. Yeah. It's like a sort of temporary plaster, and we fixed it and we sort of strung it together and made it work. But that doesn't mean that's how it is. It's just that this is sort of short-term stopgaps. So I think it's, digitalization of a business, digital enablement, digital communication is being forced upon us. And of course, we're all reacting and doing whatever we can do to sort of shore up client relationships, win new business, and so on. But to the point that Ryan made, the first 3 or 4 weeks, it was inappropriate to sell to anyone. So the messages, and I've been around the block enough to know this, but I see all of the LinkedIn requests and all of the emails and all the messages, and I can just very simply, I can see the BS factor in most of this. which is when somebody reaches out to me, there's got to be a reason, you know, because people, as humans, we're just naturally cynical about people's approaches.
Right.
So, you know, if I get somebody who just wants to be my friend, you know, or wants to engage with me, there's got to be something behind it. And I'll give you a very good example of this. Is one of the very first webinars we did in early Ket was around the sort of cash flow management.
Yeah.
We did about, you know, bulletproofing your business with Michael.
Yep.
And in that event, I gave an offer to any viewer that I've got a budget template, which is like a P&L forecast, and a rolling cash flow forecast template. And I offered completely free with no catches. You can have this. Okay, I'll send it to you by email, and I'd be very happy to help you complete it all and fit it all in at no cost. How many replies do you think I got to that?
One?
None. Not one. Now, you know, that doesn't worry me because, frankly, you know, for that event, no one knows who I am. You know, I've got no background or authenticity around me. So naturally, people are a bit cynical. There's going to be a catch in there somewhere. So I think the way you've really got to plan through that the elements of the feelings that you create in people with your communication, and it's not just digital; it's principally digital. You know, there isn't. I mean, what we're doing here by way of a visual environment is a lot more trusting than just say a podcast. You know, because and it's much better than a blog. You know, and it's, as we know, it is so easy to plagiarize content and copy and paste, and you know, you can play around with stuff. But this engagement we're having right now, this is the next best thing to physical engagement in terms of authenticity. So I come back. I think everything that we do must be thought from the context of the feeling that you create with somebody, and is it based around authenticity?
So actually, and Ryan, as I go to David now, to where we start talking about user experience, because that's part of what Piers is saying here, and the fact that people need to feel trusted. There is going to be a high level of skepticism. Ryan, I want you to kind of think about how communications and open rates work at this moment in time. You know, what people are doing, how do they engage with the content that we communicate to them? Like Piers gave an example of offering something, but people kind of step back and they don't take it on because they think there's a hook attached to it somewhere along the line. I think equally, if we're thinking about, if we put digital communications to one side, as Ryan thinks about all of those things around open rates, and we go to David around user experience, you know, that's the other side to this. It's not as like you said, Piers, where you just bolt things together and push it out there as a flimsy go-kart at this moment in time. I think people are very, as digital consumers now, David, we are very much, or people that consume so much stuff digitally, should I say, we've come a little bit spoiled with this whole user experience thing. So what kind of insights do you have around things like plugins, web apps, those that are considering thinking, actually, maybe this is time for me to build my own kind of little platform or go in and have my own little app? What kind of insights and conversations are you having around there?
Well, one of the base reasons for building my own company on this was looking around at what's out there in the environment. You see so many different things. You see WordPress, you see ClickFunnels, you see all these different plugins. And in order to get one consolidated system, you have to take all these things in from everywhere. You don't know where they're coming from. You don't know what they are. You don't know how reliable they are. You don't know how well they're going to integrate or fit in. So that is the principal reason of building Absoluta, where I have provided everything in one place. And I think that is a better user experience for a customer coming along, where they can see, right, we know we only have to go to one place and put everything in, because then you are not reliant on all these external plugins. Now, with just coming back to what you were saying about authenticity as well, I think, you know, up to now, there's been a lot of, oh, there's this whole COVID going on. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? And, you know, sympathy, et cetera, et cetera. I think we've moved past that. And we've gone to the point where now we have to say, right, we now have to put action in place to ensure that we can get past this period now and also cater for the future. Because this can happen again. We may not have reached the peak of the wave, or it may be a second wave. So we need to cater for the future and do it as quickly, as simply, as cost effectively as possible, because obviously cost is now a factor for everybody, every company. And when you're starting to put all different plugins, often these things cost a lot of money. So there needs to be a simple and clean solution for it without breaking the bank and catering for the future, so that excuse me, your system is going to be robust in the long term.
I mean, it's just to bring in a point. The reason why I say this is I've been doing a little bit of research running up to today's webinar, and I've seen an abundance of new little apps and that you can now download to help you make YouTube trailers and make your little engaging content. Or if you want to download music tracks which are available for commercial use or personal use for your videos and stuff like this. And I mean, literally, my timelines are getting filled with these adverts, and all they are, you know, okay, we'll give you sort of 10 days free or 30 days free, and then it's £10 a month, and then, you know, or they want you to buy a whole year of their subscription, you know. So there's a lot of SaaS coming out there, but how many different tools can you have or should you be using if you're trying to pull this together? And I'll tell you why. Yesterday, I had my first attempt at making my own video. Okay, it's I'm no Steven Spielberg or anything like that, put it that way, no George Lucas or anything like that whatsoever. But what I did is I just used my webcam. I used a bit of video editing software so I could put some subtitles and a bit of a video overlay, and it hasn't really cost me anything apart from probably about an hour and a half of my time to do it. But you know, to do that, you know, a one or 2 minute video, it took me about that kind of amount of time. But I think the point I'm getting to is it's this engagement piece that we've got to now cater for so many different user experiences. You've got to have the subtitles. You've got to have this. You've got to have video overlay. You've got to have a really sharp, crisp image. You've got all these different things for the user experience. That if you are thinking about just coming up, setting up, and using digital, the chances of you really getting engagement from people because your content is authentic, yet it's not presented in a way that people feel it's authentic, could lose 90% of your audience.
Can I just jump in? I think, you know, I mean, this goes back to my days when I was working with Pomegranate, but I think, you know, user experience is a subset of customer experience. And, you know, the customer experience is a kind of an omni-channel concept. Okay, so if I'm a customer of your business, the touch points that you give me, whether they're digital, physical, or otherwise, are all part of that reputation and brand building. So I think from a user experience, it's important to keep the context of making sure that the dots within that are joined up to the other dots on the other platforms. So, for example, something I find quite interesting is when somebody has a website and they make a mobile version of their website, and it's just identical content, just in a slightly similar format. But not realizing, perhaps, you know, for myself, maybe, you know, I'm different to a few people, but I don't tend to consume a brochureware or website content on a mobile device. For me, it's a light touch idea. So I'd much prefer to have an app with minimalized content that just reinforces the main purpose of a website. And again, when you look at a website, people talk about, you know, I need to have a website. Well, you've got to ask yourself why. You know, what's the point of it? What's its purpose? So I think, you know, defining purpose is a very big part of this, and just understanding your touch points with customers. And only then can you define the user experience based on what you think each one of those digital components will add to the customer experience. So if it's an app, or if it's a, you know, a webinar or a podcast, it doesn't matter what it is. Okay, how does that impact the customer experience? And that's the big picture. And the specific applications of the user experiences within that. So if it's a shopping cart, or if it's a, you know, a brochureware, or a form to complete, or a survey, you know, that's the user experience. So they're all just subsets of a much bigger picture.
I think also it depends on your target audience as well, and the size of your company. If you're a large corporate company, you're going to have your own studios where you can, you know, put together professional videos. If you're a little man in the street or a little hair salon or something, you may want to just make a video at home with that personal, authentic touch. So again, it depends on your budget. Either way, you can get away with minimalistic type software, or using a phone even to do it, just like we're doing right now, you know, sitting in front of the computer with a backdrop or something like that. So it doesn't have to be expensive. It depends on the message you want to get out as well.
Well, and again, and we're going to get to message in a second, Ryan, in purely on that kind of base of how you communicate to get people engaged and open up to this. But is it not? And what I mean by this is, aren't consumers becoming a lot more spoiled or overindulgent? So it's kind of, if you do a very short video, you could lose your message in trying to be so cool and hip and and technical, right the way through to actually, if you've got something that's more than 3 or 4 minutes, people are actually watching around the video, I guess, and they're looking at different things like what color shirt you're wearing and what kind of tattoo you've got, or something like that, for example. So just think about that from a little while perspective, both Piers and David. I'm coming back over to you, Ryan, on this whole thing around communication and open rates. I think there is never going to be a silver bullet that you can put out there in terms of being able to cast nets of communication and get 100% of people opening it and engaging the right way. But more and more important now are going to be kind of like your email titles, your headers, the way that you introduce your initial message without kind of without, I guess, trying to put exact scripts together right now. What kind of tips do you have, or what kind of things have you guys learned over the last period that's actually not working and working? Could you share?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of intelligence in building a message that's going to be opened, going to be read, going to be responded to, and different factors contributing to each of those things. And I think that science has been built up over the years, to be honest. It hasn't necessarily radically changed during the last 2 or 3 months. Yeah, I mean, we tend to, so the job of the subject line, for example, is not to sell a product or a service. It really has one function: to get your prospect to open your email and read the first line. And yeah, in that regard, yeah, just something snappy, overly descriptive tends not to work. Dropping the prospect's name into the subject line tends not to work. And the reason that tends not to work, because you think it's counterintuitive actually, because it's a point of personalization, but because so many marketing engines do that en masse now, if you find your first name in the subject line of an email, the first thing that your subconscious is telling you is that here's a marketing message, probably just skip right past it. So yeah, avoiding those things. Yeah, I mean, just something short and snappy in the subject line that, you know, bit brief, not particularly overly descriptive. Then you're onto the first line of your message. There's a kind of tendency to want to use really great marketing copy in outbound communications, but really the purpose of an outbound email when you're looking to generate sales is it's not necessarily to sell something or to really describe it fantastically. It's just about being a person. You know, if somebody's reading your email and they get to the end of it and think that somebody sat there and typed out a quick email to me and pressed send 5 minutes ago, then you're very likely to get a response. You're certainly a lot more likely to get a response than if you've got a really well crafted description or a kind of here's a PDF that we've prepared for you.
And just before you come in, Piers, I know you want to come in there. I'm going to get in front of you because it's my webinar. So this is an interesting point. Do you think that we are as communicators, when we're putting these emails together, we move away from that not authentic but that natural communication flow that we have, and almost go into sales mode, that we have to cram in all our fabs and stuff like this in as quickly as possible, so because we've only got a very short window of attention.
Absolutely. So what's driving the results from outbound email marketing campaigns is being personal. Is the personal nature of the communication. 100%. And this is something that's it's part your kind of personal. People are predisposed to want, as you said, Ketan, to put as much as possible into that email. But then there's also, certainly in larger companies, you've often got kind of marketing departments and sort of sign off for marketing copy, communications need to, and actually if there's a lot of a lot of investment riding in a particular feature or something that needs to be squeezed in, and somebody else is saying, can we make sure we mention this in it? And people with different interests are getting involved, and all of a sudden you've got something that's a bit of a kind of Franken message with just anything but what you actually want, which is a couple of lines just saying, hi Tony, Ryan here from SoPro, love to chat, think we can help with your prospecting, do you fancy a coffee next Thursday, which is really what we should be saying.
Yeah. Piers, did you
Yeah, I mean, I see it from a communication point of view. A lot of fire and forget marketing. You know, people think, right, I sent an email, therefore it's done. Okay, and they expect too much of a piece of communication. And it reminds me back to a very famous advertising campaign done by McGraw-Hill, the publishers, if you know them. This was back in I think it was actually in the early 80s, where there was a picture of a buyer sitting on a chair. And next to it was the narrative, which is, I don't know who you are, I don't know your company, I don't know your company's products, I don't know what your company stands for, I don't know your customers, I don't know your record, I don't know your reputation, and I don't know you. Now, what was it you wanted to sell to me? And you know, when you think about that, it's that they're promoting why you should market your business. So I think it's about not allowing your communication to try and do too much. And you know, Ryan, you picked up on this in terms of, you know, the headers. If you're expecting somebody you've never spoken to before, perhaps met once, or I don't know, they've heard of you. If you expect an email to get in there, get the meeting, build a reputation, build the trust, close a sale, get a quota, forget it. It's just not going to happen. So, you know, the advice I give to anybody in terms of, you know, marketing communication is this thing of repetition creates reputation. So have a series of communications that you can deliver to your potential audience. Understanding something like along the following: nobody will ever buy without a need. Okay, so I find this so amusing. So when I book I book flights. Last flight I booked was to Denver, which I didn't go on, funny enough. And immediately I go on all my social feeds and I've been marketed cheap flights to Denver. You know, get to Denver on this hour. I've just booked my ticket. I don't need another one. You know, and the same thing about holidays. If I book my holiday, you know, I want to go to the Canary Islands. Suddenly, cheap holidays to the Canary Islands. You know, it's just you're just trying too hard. So I think that the thing is just to try and build your communication in a more structured way and just understand what it is you're trying to achieve with that piece of communication. And I think, to Ryan's point, personalization is very, very important. But don't try too hard to be too personal, because that can be quite invasive. So I try and find, you know, to get into the headspace of people. If you can get into their heads, you can get into their hearts. And in order to do that is scenario-based communications, you know, storytelling. Get someone to think, ah, that's me. Yeah, I get that. Okay, yeah, that's talking, that's making sense, because you're building an emotional relationship with a person. So just kind of think about what it is your objective is. You know, if you want to get meetings, you know, I can't stand these, you know, are you free at 2 p.m. on Wednesday? I've got one slot left. Well, I don't. So, you know, get to know me first, build a relationship.
Oh, the irony of the fact that I just sent you an email with one of those on there. I wonder if you're going to respond to it. But actually,
I just think we try too hard. That's the point.
Okay, so look, you know what? We talk a little bit about the style and type of communication. Ryan's brought in some really good elements about personalization. You talk about this whole thing of repetition builds a reputation. I think, you know, sticking, you know, David, sticking to the whole user experience thing, you know, in your experience and expertise, how important is it that the communications and the way that you're engaging with your prospects or your customers needs to feel the same when people are coming in and looking at those different digital tools and assets that you have? Because sometimes you could have I had a very, very strange conversation this morning with someone about, isn't it funny, or have you ever been in those instances where you've looked at someone's profile picture and when you've met them in person, they look nothing like the profile picture that they presented? And it's this kind of very huge disconnect that you have, even for a small split second in your head. But it's quite easy for communications to be really, really pumped up and suave and professional, and then all of a sudden they land, and you know what you've portrayed as a profile picture is very different to what they actually see. How important is it that your digital assets are actually matching the quality of your communications?
I think it's essential. I don't know how many times I've had exactly that marketing information come to me. I click on it, I go look at the site, I think, really? Do I want to even look at the site? I shut the site down. I think, you know, it looks like a spam or a scam. You can't trust it then. So you need to be able to have trust going from your marketing all the way through to the end product. And the end product, when they arrive at your website or your mobile app, has to be professional, has to mirror marketing that you're putting out there, and has to make the customer or the client feel comfortable and trust that what you're telling them is what they're getting. So it's essential.
So yeah, just bringing that, because that brings in, Piers, your point about the fact that you just booked a flight to Denver, and then every single opportunity, wherever social you go, they're advertising for a short period of time because of the way that they pick up this information and data. But Ryan, coming back to prospecting and when you're doing email sequences and stuff like this, your first email is very much a kind of and you know, the title's all about getting it open. The first couple of lines is very much about getting the person engaged. What are your recommendations on then having different things like maybe lead pages or different things going on, or even, shall I say, dare I say it, a video message where perhaps you're actually trying to distribute a bit of your energy, your personal energy, to someone as well?
Yeah, it's a really topical question, and yeah, quite timely as well. And I've got a good stat actually. I'll start with. So we know sort of firsthand from, I mean, we send millions of prospect engagement messages each year, and what we know is that of the responses that we receive, around about 30% of them have clicked on the link to view the website first. So if you bear that in mind, it stands to reason, and the stats bear out that those clients with really good websites and the links on their emails are routing through to content that's relevant to the email in hand, rather than perhaps the landing page and they've got 126 different products. And there's some thought, and the quality of that content supporting the experience of receiving the message makes a huge difference. And it those clients with lower quality web experiences do see a lower response rate as a result. So it all ties together quite interestingly. I think on the content side at the moment, because where we are, we've had sort of 10 or 12 traditional channels, some of those being kind of physical and face-to-face, and others being just kind of rendered ineffective at the moment just because of the pandemic response scenario. We've got a lot of businesses with kind of 2 or 3 viable digital channels at the moment, and all of a sudden, loads of kind of content budget and stuff being kind of pushed through. You jump on LinkedIn for 5 minutes, you'll see the volume of social content being pushed out. I think companies have amped up their number of daily or weekly posts quite significantly. And what that means is it's becoming more difficult to cut through with the same content or the same level of content that you might have been running 6 months ago. And the net result of that is you need better quality, richer, more engaging content to get mind share and attention right now. So on to your question about video, Ketan, it was timely because I actually sent my first video prospecting message last week, which was just to test the format. We're thinking of incorporating video prospecting within SoPro's standard campaign format, and just to get a sense. So we rolled that out across our UK sales team. And yeah, it's just a really interesting approach, the way that you can actually now use technology to send totally personalized prospecting videos on a one-to-one basis. We're not talking about kind of pre-recording something for 500 people and kind of inserting their name at the start or anything like that. We're talking about a platform-driven process to make it very quick and easy to quickly record a 30-second soundbite that goes out immediately, one after the other. Takes the pain out of it, and we're going to see formats like that absolutely take on like wildfire for sure. They're already making traction. Response rates are good. Yeah.
Just a quick question. So, I love video is clearly the new flavour of the du jour. But how do you cope with video getting past corporate firewalls?
It's pretty straightforward. It's hosted on a web platform. Your email goes through with a link. There's usually a GIF or an image, like an image of your face or whatever. I think mine was me, waving, looking interesting, with a play button in the middle, and that's hyperlinked to the location of the video online. So you're not sending an attachment as such. It hasn't been a problem.
You do it more as a thumbnail. You kind of put it as a thumbnail image, and then with a hyperlink behind it, and then that goes off to another sort of secure server. So I guess
So
that,
it depends. I think, you know, and I love the innovation around that, but I think it's very important to understand, you know, the corporate companies particularly are so worried about cybersecurity. They kind of block anything HTML, any videos. They don't like clicking on unknown links and so on. So I think it's a balance of getting it right. I think the video thing works probably once you've got a little bit of engagement, but I think as a cold engagement, it probably doesn't work.
Speaking about engagement, and coming back to you, David, here on this, things like message bots, and we knew for a period of time, and Ryan probably can agree with this, that open rates were substantially higher on things like text messaging and WhatsApp messaging and stuff like that, you know, compared to things just as emails. But we've seen, I've seen a slight death in bots recently, and message bots. Is this something that we're going to see as a sign of our future as people become more and more personally connected to their communications, or is it? Do you think it's just that obviously people weren't prepared for this pandemic, and as a result, their bots are kind of a bit outdated or not effective right now?
Well, I think I've had quite a few people come to me and say they want a bot in their website, a chat bot. But nowadays, you can link those chatbots to Skype. You can link to WhatsApp. You can link it, you know, in many different ways. And most people have on their phone the actual bot endpoint, if you wish. So somebody who chats to them on the website, they'll get an immediate notification on their phone, and they can chat to them on their phone. So I haven't found a drop in that. In fact, just the opposite. I've found people wanting more and more to have these bots on their website so they can have instantaneous communication without having to wait for an email or any other form of communication. A lot of people don't want to phone, or if they do phone, they get stuck on the line for half an hour and they don't want to wait. So they'd rather just chat and get an instantaneous response. So I think bots are still quite prevalent, and I think it will become more so because they can now connect to different kinds of technologies. If I could just come back to one thing about the sending emails with links in them. How did you actually, Ryan, this is a question for you there, how are you finding people actually connecting with that? Because when I get an email with a link in it that I don't know, I'm not going to click it, because 9 times out of 10 it's going to take me to some site that's got some kind of virus on it or who knows what, and I don't know, I'm just going to delete that email. If it's from somebody I do know, I'm going to go to the website as opposed to clicking the link, because I still don't trust it, because it might be phishing.
It's interesting reception actually, and you know, I think from somebody with a technical background, I can relate to that. That does make sense. The reality of the sort of security side of the link, it is no different to a link that might be in my signature or anything. So it is going to get through to your recipient, and certainly in the vast majority of cases. It comes down to how you're introducing it. Those links, the format that ours are going out in are just a standard prospecting email, and it's a quick intro saying, hey, look, rather than a 60-second email, thought I'd drop you a 30-second video instead, and here's a quick link. It'd be great to hear back from you. I mean, as I mentioned, we're testing across our UK sales team at the moment. Well, I think we'll have the results in later this month. If I was, in fact, I am a betting man. I think it will be as effective as traditional email, and possibly more so. Is kind of where I am.
I hope so, Ryan, because I think the one thing that video element brings, it brings greater authenticity, because you can see the person speaking.
Yeah.
And and that just, whereas just writing something, it's a very one-dimensional approach in communication. So if we can get over some of the technical and trust issues, then I hope that sort of format works, because it is a vastly expedited form of communication, but it does deliver the authenticity, because it touches all those touch points again. You can see, you can hear, and you get a sense of feeling about it.
And again, this just comes back to this whole thing that I've been talking about in terms of UX, this whole experience that people need to feel, yes, there is a certain amount of messaging and you can get across, or communication you can get across on an email. Maybe it's 1.5 dimension in that respect, but again, if you put too much detail too early, you lose your prospect. If you put too much detail later on in your process, you lose your prospect, because it's not kind of fit through. you know, David, you bring up this whole thing of, right, okay, I've got this communication. If I go and click on their website and it doesn't really show me anything which is relevant to this, you've switched off from this. I think bringing video content into your messaging does do one other thing. It brings that energy and emotion that you can't perhaps put into the written word per se. So as we come towards the close of this this session right now, I want to think about this bit that Piers mentioned earlier about storification and stories. I think this is one of the most powerful ways of marketing and messaging. I mean, I know, Ryan, you've had experience where you guys have probably put situational, scenario-based emails together about, here is John, and John's 34 and he's done X, Y, and Z kind of thing. But before we go into the communication side of Storify, David, with the kind of now your current uptake of clients and the people that you work with, are you finding that you're producing more digital platforms that tell stories or share the stories and experiences rather than just a cookie cutter kind of 3-page website which just has services about us and contact and things like that?
Very much so, but it's been like that even before the COVID as well. It's been gradually building up. More and more people are realizing that they need to have the right content, and I've been pushing that to people as well, because a website that has no content is useless. It doesn't do anything for you. You need to have that content. A lot more people are using blogs now, whereas they didn't do that before, because they realized that blog adds content, adds power to your website, and gives it that personal touch as well. So yes, websites have moved beyond this, 3 pages, 1, 2, 3 pages, whatever it may be, onto something a bit more robust, but without wasting space and without talking for the sake of talking. It's got to have that correct message. It's got to be clear, concise, and look good, and have the same effect as the same messages, I should say, as your marketing message goes out there as well. So people are realizing that they do need to have various sections to it, and build it up from there. So it's more than that now.
And Ryan, coming into storification, how in your experience, how fast should people be trying to get people off prospects off email and into these kind of conversations, or get them into parts of their websites where they can really give them that theatrical experience of what's going on?
Yeah, so I think there's your different marketing channels are there to do different things, and I think your your newsletter-based emails, I think there's much more of a kind of journey, to take people through, and it's not necessarily a chronological journey. It's really about kind of the number of touch points they've had and the number of things that they might have read and times that they've heard from you. And over time, and that might be combined with some sort of social activity as well, following them on Twitter or engaging them with them on LinkedIn, and that coming together to then put them into a position that they might be a bit more responsive or receptive to your sales messages. But I think where we sit really is that kind of frontline sales, supporting the biz dev teams that need deals on the table, pitches next week, and clients in later this month. Those situations are always a little bit more hungry for results now, and are the messaging that tends to be the most effective. I think, and I know that Piers is going to give me a hairy eyeball when I say this, but pretty much any email communication, if you've got somebody reading your message, the next step should be just something that's more a step further down the engagement, rather than backwards. And I personally think sending somebody to a website or to read a white paper, you're taking them out of what is effectively direct dialogue and moving them into a situation where they're no longer in conversation with you, where actually if you've got them reading a message there and then, to give them the right logic to take that onto a quick call to discuss in a bit more detail, it is not as hard as we might think, and actually doing that will always deliver you far more results in the short term than any other strategy. So that's our approach.
It's kind of a strike while the iron's hot kind of.
Absolutely.
In that respect. Okay, that's.
Could I just add to that? I think it depends on whether you've got a transaction relationship with a customer, or a relationship with a customer. So if you're selling services, for example, which marketing is a classic example. I mean, I've owned marketing agencies, and it's one of the hardest things in the world to sell.
Yeah.
You're selling an intangible product. You can't guarantee it. It's expensive. You pay cash for it. Totally subjective. The most competitive market, and one of the first budgets to get cut. That's a hard thing to sell. You've also got cynical buyers. So there's no amount of content, no amount of communication is going to get over that. You've got to build a relationship, and it'll get the trust and the authenticity. Yeah. So I think it's a multi-pronged approach. If you're selling, sort of one-time consumption products, you want to buy food, you go to a trusted brand because it's inherent, and it's just about the transaction. That's where the user experience is important. Mm. So I think the way you communicate with somebody from an email perspective is very, very dependent on the type of relationship you want to have with that customer and what they're looking to achieve. Yeah. And that's where good research comes into to understand the customer's mindsets and know your target audience.
I think to bring it back to that point there, Piers, is a really nice way to kind of now put a pin at this stage on when we're talking about digital strategies. For all of you out there that are watching this, this last 45 to 50 minutes, we've kind of looked at different tools and resources that you can use for digitization. You don't have to digitize your whole business, but there's got to be a strong human element to it. We've talked away from the personalization to the different types of channels, the strike while it's hot, right the way through to keep building that relationship through storification. Gents, it's been a really interesting period to go through this. Ryan, how can people find out more about what you guys are doing, and if they're thinking, do you know what, we could do with a bit more of this strike while it's hot type of process, and how do they find you?
Yeah, jump onto SoPro.io, SoPro.io. Loads of cool tools there. We've got we've got a core service that we'd love to talk you through, but there's also a great set of free tools from kind of email finding. We've got an email awesomeness checker that will help you with text, etc. Email deliverability testers. So a whole set of stuff. Lots of interesting content there as well. So I'm on there on the contact page. You've got my contact details. Feel free to give me a buzz directly, drop me an email, and happy to talk you through anything everything that we do.
Email awesome. I like that. Is there an email awesomeness barometer? It kind of tells you how awesome your emails are. Is that what it does?
It gives you a score out of 100, and usually gives you a few tips. I still use it. I mean, it's a bit of fun. It's never the you wouldn't use it on its own in the absence of some common sense. But things like word counts, type of language. Are you repeating words? Are you is it too long, too short? Are there too many links, or whatever? Is it likely to deliver? Or hit spam, etc.
You know what? It's a great tool to use as, again, from an expert authority perspective. I'll give you an example why. Back in the day, when I used to have my own sort of, or as part of another business that was doing a lot of stuff around funnels and developing funnels, one of the things that we used to do is go up and give a critique of people's Facebook pages, and used to use this other piece of tool that gives you all the scores and the gradings. It's free, but it used to give you this, and that's a great way of bringing up to a certain level to start that kind of conversation. So even using something like email awesomeness to then start having a conversation is brilliant. It's brilliant connectivity. David, what kind of stuff are you up to, and how can people find you? Because I'm sure there are people who are now sitting here watching this, probably still on lockdown, thinking, maybe it's time I change my website. Maybe it's time I, upgrade. I mean, they've been doing DIY in their homes. They might as well DIY their business web pages, right?
Exactly, yes. Well, you can always just jump onto the website, appzula.com. We're in the process of rebranding ourselves at the moment as well. So the next couple of days, you're going to see a completely new look and feel on the website. Right. What we had it's gone, it's done, had to stay. So it's time to rebrand. And we'll be doing this on a continuous basis as well. So this is very much a message to our clients as well.
Yeah.
So, a website is never static. So if they jump onto there, drop us a message if necessary. We either build it for them, or clients can go online and they can build it themselves. So they can build a website, mobile app. And we have funnels built into our websites as well. So there's no need to buy external tools like ClickFunnels. Sorry, but
Right.
yes, we can build it all for them, or they can do it themselves. And yeah, just hop on and have a look.
So there you guys have it. You know, if you're now kind of sick and tired of doing the DIY at home, you can go to David's store and pick up a whole load of DIY to do on your online house, if you want to call that. Last but not least, Piers. I know that you plaster your contact information all over the place, basically. But how can people get in touch with you? Because I know you give lots and lots of kind of advice, guidance, and you've got the whole Tech CXO stuff going on, right? So
yeah, well, I mean, I'm also fortunate to have a totally unique name, so I'm the only one of me on the internet. So if you just type my name into Google, you'll find me everywhere. But I would also, something we haven't touched on, which I'd love to talk more about at some point, is about referrals and recommendations. So
yeah.
Best way to get in touch with me is find someone who knows me and ask them what they think of me. And if you think it's worth contacting me, pick the phone up and ring me. I love a cold call. I love, people just picking the phone up and just getting in touch. But actually, LinkedIn, very easy way to get in touch. And of course, Tech CXO, which is the business I represent here in the UK. And always got an opinion, as you well know. I'm always happy to be controversial and take both sides of a fence. But just pick the phone up. Probably the easiest way to get in touch with me, or drop me an email.
Fantastic. So, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us today and giving you all the kind of expertise, experience, and the context. I think it's fair to say it's been a very well kind of cohesive conversation going in and out of the different areas. Guys, if you're watching this right now, reach out to these guys if you've got any questions, if you're looking for particular things specifically. There will be some other further contextual information put onto digital asset downloads, which you'll be able to find on the resource center. And last but not least, watch out for the finishing webinars for this week. We have NatWest rejoining us to talk about bounce back loans tomorrow, and we're finishing the week off with Piers and the man they call Michael Jacobson, the bulletproof man, where we'll be talking about bulletproofing and strategies for your business as we enter recovery. But for now, please continue to stay at home, stop the spread, keep saving lives. Thanks a lot, guys.